get to say that I'm not a real wife and act like I'm the goddamn problem.
You see how she get it? That's why I drive to Virginia.
I just wanna Rebecca to be like a wife, a real wife.
How am I not a real wife?
I want to hear the rest of his sentence.
Can we deal with it? You were the one interrupting him.
Can you?
Oh my God, shut the up. What are you bitching about?
I'm so tired of hearing her voice.
I'm excited for the hiking and the camping because most of the time she give all her time to her job and no time for me.
This was never really about cooking. That is what makes Rebecca and Zied's campfire fight so much more serious than it first looked. On the surface, they were arguing about work hours, food, phones, and whether Rebecca spends enough time at home. But the second Zied said he wanted Rebecca to be a real wife, the conversation stopped being about behavior and became a public argument about identity. And Rebecca did not respond by calmly explaining what she contributes to the marriage. She grabbed the exact same weapon and threw it back at him. If she was not a real wife, then he was not a real husband. In a matter of minutes, two people who had just been laughing, hiking, setting up a tent, and appearing closer than they had in a long time were suddenly trying to prove who had failed the marriage more. And that is the real story here. Rebecca believes she has shown love by working, providing, paying bills, and creating stability. Zied believes marriage should feel like companionship, shared meals, conversation, attention, and daily connection. One is demanding gratitude. The other is demanding presence. Both think their contribution should be obvious. Neither feels understood. Then we have the deeper questions. Is Zied really asking for emotional closeness, or is he also expecting Rebecca to perform a traditional wife role? Is Rebecca working nonstop because the bills require it, or has work become a place where she can avoid dealing with the marriage? Is Zied emotionally abandoned, financially dependent, or somehow both? And if these two are still together after filming, did they solve anything? Or did they simply return home and continue the same fight in a quieter room? Because the campfire did not create this problem. It exposed it. At the beginning of the wilderness exercise, Rebecca and Zied actually looked good together. They were cooperating. They were joking. They managed the hike and the campsite without turning every small inconvenience into a relationship emergency, which on this franchise already counts as an Olympic-level achievement. Zied seemed genuinely happy that Rebecca was present. She was not buried in work. She was not focused on her phone. They were doing something together, and for a brief period, their relationship looked lighter. But that improvement was not proof that their marriage had changed. It was proof that their environment had changed. Rebecca was away from work. Their normal responsibilities were temporarily removed. Their phones were less important. The entire exercise was designed to force them into the same physical and emotional space. Naturally, they seemed more connected. The resort had basically removed every stressor that normally sits between them. The problem is that real life was waiting outside the campground. When Zied explained that they were doing better because Rebecca was not working all the time, he was not attacking one random habit. He was pointing directly at the structure of their life together. In his mind, the resort version of Rebecca was available, playful, attentive, and connected. The home version of Rebecca was tired, distracted, overworked, and emotionally absent. Rebecca did not hear that as loneliness. She heard it as disrespect. That difference matters because Rebecca appears to connect her value as a wife to what she provides. She works long hours. She pays bills. She talks about the home, the lifestyle, the security, and everything her labor has made possible. So when Zied says he hates his life, Rebecca does not hear, "I miss you." She hears, "Everything you have sacrificed for me means nothing." And honestly, that would hurt. Imagine working 14 or 16 hours, coming home exhausted, and then hearing that the person benefiting from that work is miserable. Rebecca is not wrong for wanting acknowledgement. She is not wrong for feeling that her effort should count. She is not wrong for being offended when Zied uses the phrase real wife, because that phrase does not criticize one specific behavior. It questions whether she qualifies as a wife at all. But this is where Rebecca's sympathetic position starts colliding with her own behavior. She says she wants answers, but she does not create the conditions for an answer. She demands clarification immediately. She fills every silence. She treats Zied's hesitation like proof that he is hiding something. And because she speaks faster, processes faster, and has a stronger command of English, she controls the entire pace of the argument. Zied, meanwhile, does not communicate in a way that helps his case. He uses huge statements when he seems to be describing specific pain. He says he hates his life. He says he wants a real wife. Those are explosive phrases. They are emotionally loaded, vague, and almost impossible to repair after they land. If Zied's actual need is more quality time, then he should say that. If he wants 2 nights a week with no phones, he should say that. If he wants them to eat dinner together, he should say that. If he feels lonely when Rebecca works late, he should say that. Those are specific problems with specific solutions. But "I want a real wife" is not a solution-based statement. It is an identity judgment. That is why his strange distinction between Rebecca being a good wife but not a real wife makes the entire conversation worse. What does that even mean? Good describes performance. Real describes legitimacy. He is basically telling her that she may do useful things, but she still does not match his internal definition of what a wife is supposed to be. And that is where the cooking issue becomes more complicated. Some viewers are saying Zied was not really asking for a servant. They believe cooking was simply one example of the home life he misses. They point out that he repeatedly talks about not communicating, not spending time together, and not feeling like they live as a married couple. In that interpretation, food represents connection. Shared meals represent intimacy. Rebecca cooking is not necessarily about service. It is about creating a routine together.
There is some truth in that.
But we also cannot pretend Zied did not bring up cooking as part of his definition of a real wife. Emotional closeness and traditional expectations can exist at the same time. It does not have to be one or the other. He may genuinely want more companionship while also believing that a wife should create a certain kind of home life. That is the part some fans are uncomfortable excusing. Because if Rebecca is working extreme hours to support the household, expecting her to come home and prepare meals sounds unreasonable unless Zied is also taking on a fair share of the responsibilities. A marriage cannot be called 50-50 while discussing emotional needs, and then suddenly become traditional when dinner is involved. The episode also leaves out some very important financial details. How much is each person earning? How are the bills divided? Who handles cleaning? Who shops? Who cooks now? Why does Rebecca need to work 14 or 16 hours? Could they reduce their expenses? Could Zied contribute more? Is Rebecca choosing extra work because the household truly needs it, or because work gives her control and distance? Does Zied want more time with her without accepting what that would cost financially? We do not have complete answers, so it would be unfair to declare either person completely responsible. But the missing information matters because the argument is built around 2 competing realities. Rebecca says, "The bills are paid." Zied says, "We do not have a marriage." Both statements can be true. Financial security does not automatically create emotional intimacy. But emotional loneliness does not erase financial sacrifice. Their mistake is treating one kind of contribution as proof that the other person's complaint is invalid. Rebecca's position seems to be that because she is carrying the practical burden, Zied should not criticize the emotional state of the relationship. Zied's position seems to be that because he feels emotionally abandoned, Rebecca's practical contribution cannot be considered enough. This is why they keep talking past each other. Rebecca is presenting receipts. Zied is describing emptiness. She wants appreciation for what she does. He wants connection that cannot be purchased. And then Shekinah enters the conversation, because apparently one unstable argument was not crowded enough. To be fair, Shekinah was partly correct. Zied did need time to speak. Rebecca was interrupting him, demanding answers, and escalating while he was visibly struggling to explain himself. Somebody needed to slow the conversation down. But Shekinah was possibly the worst person to do it. The moment she defended Zied, Rebecca stopped hearing concern and started hearing attack. Now the conversation was no longer just about Rebecca and Zied. It became Rebecca versus Shekinah, with Zied sitting in the middle while the original issue disappeared. Shekinah did not create the marriage problem, but she gave Rebecca an escape route. Instead of confronting the possibility that Zied feels emotionally disconnected, Rebecca could focus on being interrupted, judged, and ganged up on. And that shift also made Zied more passive. The more Shekinah spoke for him, the less he had to explain himself. That is not helpful. If the goal is for Zied to communicate, then turning him into the silent person being defended by somebody else does not solve anything. The therapist eventually tries to redirect the conversation by asking a better question. What does a real wife look like to Zied? That question is useful because it forces him to move from labels to behaviors. He talks about not communicating, Rebecca working all the time, not cooking, and not spending enough time together. Suddenly, the issue becomes clearer, but it also becomes more controversial. Because some of his complaints sound like emotional neglect. Others sound like gender expectations. And viewers are divided over which one should define the conversation. A section of the audience believes Rebecca is being unfairly criticized because she is the one working herself into exhaustion. These viewers argue that Zied wants the benefits of a traditional marriage without fully explaining what he contributes to make that possible. They hear real wife and immediately recognize the gendered pressure inside that phrase. Another section of the audience believes Rebecca is using money as a shield. They say she never lets Zied finish a thought, treats every criticism like betrayal, and then acts shocked when he becomes frustrated. In their view, Rebecca may pay the bills, but she also controls the emotional climate of the relationship. Many viewers are landing somewhere in the middle. They think Zied's wording was hurtful and possibly sexist, but they also think Rebecca's response proved his larger point about communication. She wanted him to explain, yet she kept interrupting him. She accused him of using words to hurt her, then immediately used the same words to hurt him. That contradiction may be the most revealing moment in the entire argument. Rebecca tells Zied he is not a real husband, not because she has calmly decided that is true, but because she wants him to feel what she felt. She is trying to teach empathy through punishment. The message is basically, I will hurt you in the same way so you finally understand my pain. But that is not empathy. That is retaliation. And it works only in the sense that now both people are angry. Zied raises his voice, which Rebecca then treats as the new central offense. She walks away focused on the fact that he yelled, while Zied is left focused on the fact that she insulted him back. Once again, the original issue disappears. This is their pattern. Vulnerability gets translated into accusation. Instead of Rebecca saying, I am afraid nothing I do will ever be enough for you, she lists everything she has provided and attacks his gratitude. Instead of Zied saying, I feel lonely and I miss being close to you, he says he hates his life and wants a real wife. Instead of either person naming the fear underneath the conflict, they build a case against each other. That creates a cycle where both people feel like the victim and neither person feels responsible for the damage. Rebecca pursues harder because Zied withdraws. Zied withdraws more because Rebecca pursues harder. She wants immediate clarity.
He needs time.
She experiences his silence as avoidance. He experiences her intensity as pressure. Each person's coping style triggers the other person's worst reaction. And this did not begin at the campfire. Earlier in their story, many of their problems were framed around age, immigration, religion, jealousy, and whether Zied could adapt to life in the United States. Those were obvious conflicts. They were dramatic, visible, and easy for viewers to understand. But now the question is more serious. After the immigration process, after the marriage, after moving, and after building a life together, do they actually enjoy being married to each other? That is a much harder problem. You can solve paperwork. You can move to a new city. You can adjust to different traditions. But what happens when the life you worked so hard to build does not feel emotionally satisfying? Rebecca seems to believe the material life should prove the marriage is successful. Zied seems to believe the emotional emptiness proves it is failing. They are measuring the relationship with completely different systems. That is also why the temporary sexual reconnection does not mean much by itself. The handcuffs, the flirting, and the playful mood may show that attraction is still there. Physical chemistry may still be one of their strongest connections. But intimacy cannot carry the entire marriage when the daily structure is broken. Sex cannot decide who works how much. It cannot create a fair division of labor. It cannot resolve jealousy. It cannot fix location tracking or control. It cannot teach Rebecca to slow down. It cannot teach Zied to speak before resentment becomes an explosion. Temporary closeness can make a couple feel hopeful. But if nothing changes in their routine, hope becomes another way to delay the real conversation. That is why the storyline may continue beyond one episode. The next stage of the conflict will likely force them to discuss gender roles more directly. Rebecca will probably remain focused on the insult itself. Zied will likely try to explain that he wants attention, companionship, and a shared home life. The therapists may try to translate his vague language into specific requests. But the real test will be whether either one is willing to change something measurable. Can Rebecca reduce her work hours? And if she does, what changes financially? Can Zied contribute more, either financially or domestically? Can they schedule real time together without treating it like another therapy assignment? Can Rebecca listen through discomfort without turning the conversation into a courtroom? Can Zied express loneliness before it becomes, I hate my life? Those are the questions that matter more than whether the resort gets them to hug before the credits. Some fans feel the drama may be exaggerated because Rebecca and Zied have continued presenting themselves publicly as a couple. That is possible. Reality television rewards conflict, and editing can make one argument look like the final collapse of a marriage. But staying together does not prove the problem is fake. Plenty of couples remain married while repeating the same painful pattern for years. Social media can show anniversaries, smiling photos, and affectionate captions while leaving out the daily resentment. Public togetherness is not the same thing as private health. My prediction is that Rebecca and Zied are more likely to remain together than announce an immediate breakup. They may recommit. They may leave the resort feeling hopeful. They may even identify the correct language for the problem. But I do not think the resort can magically solve the structure of their life. Rebecca's work schedule, financial resentment, Zied's withdrawal, Rebecca's need for control, their separate routines, and their conflicting beliefs about marriage will still exist when the cameras leave. Therapy can give them tools. It cannot force them to use those tools on a random Tuesday after a 16-hour shift. And that is the long-term danger. One terrible sentence does not necessarily destroy a marriage. Couples can apologize. They can clarify. They can repair. What destroys a marriage is the repeated feeling that your partner does not recognize what you give. Rebecca feels that Zied does not recognize her sacrifice. Zied feels that Rebecca does not recognize his loneliness. Both are asking to be seen. Both are demanding it in ways that make the other person defensive. And both are slowly turning their pain into proof that the other person is the problem. So no, this was never really about cooking. Cooking was a symbol. Work was a symbol. The phone was a symbol. Even the phrase real wife was a brutal shortcut for something much larger. Rebecca and Zied never seemed to have agreed on what marriage should feel like once the fantasy, immigration process, and early excitement were gone. Rebecca built stability and expected that stability to feel like love. Zied received stability and still felt emotionally alone. He asked for closeness through language that questioned her value. She defended her value through language that questioned his. The campfire did not reveal one villain and one victim. It revealed two people who may both be right about what is missing and deeply wrong about how they are trying to get it. And that leaves the biggest question for viewers. When one spouse pays the bills but the other feels emotionally abandoned, who is really failing the marriage? Is it the partner who is never present, the partner who does not appreciate the sacrifice, or both of them for spending years together without ever agreeing on what being a husband and wife was supposed to mean?